So I just brewed myself up a fresh pot of tea, and I'm going to get to work editing my bookshelf tour. These things always take so long to edit. They take so long to film, and then they take so long to edit. I think my last one was like 40 minutes at least, and I don't even know how long this one is gonna be. So let's get to work. I mentioned in last month's reading vlog that we are doing a Pride and Prejudice read-along this summer. It's going throughout the month of July and August over in my Discord group, and everyone was posting photos of the editions they're planning to read, so I thought I would get out some of my Pride and Prejudice editions. I love the Penguin Read Red. This is my oldest original Pride and Prejudice. This is the Vintage Classics. These are such fun editions. This is just the from my Falling Apart Jane Austen version. Here's the beautiful illustrated edition. See, I think I'm gonna read one of these 3 copies. I haven't actually broken in and like read this copy, so I'm tempted to read my beautiful hardcover Penguin English Classics, but this one is fun. I actually don't like the annotations in it very much, but I can add my own annotations. So it's fun when I read this one, then I remember to write things in it for future use. So maybe I will read this one just so I can add some more notes, although this one is fun too when you get to the illustrations. If you watch my bookshelf tour, you guys will have already seen, seen these copies. But yes, very excited for the read-along. I bought myself a new hanging basket. I mentioned that the Impatiens I bought did not do very well on my sunny porch, but this guy I think will like the sun. This is called a lantana, and it's actually a mango lantana is what the name of it said. I just love the coloring of the flowers. The pink and yellow in the middle is so pretty. It has a beautiful scent, which is why I thought I'd bring it indoors. For just a little bit. It's this kind of sharp, almost citrusy, very summery scent. Definitely a lovely addition to my growing plant family. So I also have here the beginnings of my July TBR. I'm happy to say that I finished Henry IV Part 1, which means I am on track for one Shakespeare month in 2021. Last month I read Richard II, and Henry IV Part 1 is very much the sequel. King Richard II's kind of premonitions of doom are very much fulfilled, and Henry IV has problems with Northumberland and his family, the Percy family, Harry Percy in particular. Hotspur is very hot-headed. In fact, there's this one scene where he's complaining against the current king, and he's with his family members. I love all the kingly and courtly language. Worcester, get thee gone, for I do see danger and disobedience in thine eye. Oh, sir, your presence is too bold and peremptory, and majesty might never yet endure the moody frontier of a servant brow. You have good leave to leave us. So yes, Hotspur is just complaining incessantly, and his family are trying to tell him something. Now I will unclasp a secret book, and to your quick conceiving discontents I'll read you matter deep and dangerous. But like, Hotspur will not stop talking. He just keeps on interrupting Northumberland and Worcester, and they get so annoyed. Farewell, kinsman, I will talk to you when you are better tempered to attend. Why, what a wasp-stung and impatient fool art thou to break into this woman's mood, tying thine ear to no tongue but thine own. Hotspur and his camp decide to rebel against King Henry IV. Meanwhile, Henry V, so the Prince of Wales, the son of the current king, is just kind of out carousing with his friends, and his friends are thieves. And like, they just kind of make a joke of, you know, robbing pilgrims, although the prince does like, does pay them back. But yeah, no, the king is not impressed with his son. And in fact, no one is really impressed with for the Prince of Wales. But at one point he addresses the audience and tells why he's acting this way. I know you all, and will a while uphold the unyoked humour of your idleness. Yet herein will I imitate the sun, who doth permit the base contagious clouds to smother up his beauty from the world, that, when he please again to be himself, being wanted, he may be more wondered at, by breaking through the foul and ugly mists of vapours that did seem to strangle him. If all the year were playing holidays, to sport would be as tedious as to work. But when they seldom come, they wished for come, and nothing pleaseth but rare accidents. So when this loose behaviour I throw off, and pay the debt I never promised, by how much better than my word I am, by so much shall I falsify men's hopes. And like bright metal on a sullen ground, my reformation, glittering o'er my fault, shall show more goodly and attract more eyes. I'll so offend to make offence a skill, redeeming time when men think least I will. It's like, well, okay, Henry, I'm not sure what I think of that strategy, but it's the one that Henry V employs. Yes, Bardolph and Falstaff, Sir John Falstaff, are Henry's cronies who the king is not impressed with. There are so many great words. Where is his son, the nimble-footed madcap Prince of Wales, and his comrades that daft the world aside and bid it pass? Isn't daft a great word? Here's another good one. Peace, chewit, peace. Chewit means chatterer. So yes, Hotspur and Hal, the Prince of Wales, do meet on the battlefield. Spoiler alert. I mean, this is kind of obvious because the next play is Henry V. So the Prince of Wales does prevail. You know that famous line, discretion is the better part of valor? Well, it actually goes, the better part of valor is discretion, and none other than Falstaff says it. It's right after the big battle at the end. There it is. The better part of valor is discretion. So many famous lines come from Shakespeare. They always say that if there's an aphorism and you need to guess the source, the Bible or Shakespeare are good go-tos for guessing. So, do you see what's here on my stack? I found my Kindle. Yay! So I am going to download Henry IV Part 2. And that will be my July Shakespeare. And then probably I'll just go on and read Henry V for August, which I'm trying this year to read Shakespeare's that I haven't read before. And I have seen Henry V. I feel like I've also read it, but it feels like in the sequence. You know, if I'm reading Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, I should just go straight into Henry V. We'll have to see how far I get with my other books here. So these two are partially inspired by Thoreau. He quotes Confucius and the Bhagavad-gita in Walden. These are old college books, and I never wanted to get rid of them because I always felt like, well, at some point I'll want to reread them. So it would be fun to dive back into at least one of those. I would also like to make more progress in my Anne of Green Gables books, a couple of the later books in the Anne of Green Gables series. When Anne is an adult, so all of these are Anne's children, I have never read, so Rainbow Valley is up next on my list, and I feel like this would be a very fun summer read. And then also, look, I feel like the rosemary tree matches the pink book on my quilt. There are not very many Elizabeth Goudge books that I have never read, but this is one of them. I have read plenty of Elizabeth Goudge this year, but I've just been feeling like maybe it's time for another Goudge, so I would love to dip into this summer. Look, I totally match my my mango lantana. I can't decide. Oh, phew, that hornet was outside. I can't decide if it looks better this way. I think maybe this way. I just gave it a good drink. I would give you guys a quick plant update. My pansies have been going strong since end of April or beginning of May. It's just so nice to see how happy they seem to be in their lovely hanging basket. I love seeing the new buds are so pretty, the way they just kind of stick straight out. And then my lantana also seems to be settling in nicely. Such pretty colorful blooms there. I do give both of these guys quite a bit of water. They both seem to like plenty of water. And then out here in my little flower bed, just look at how tall these have gotten. They're like, okay, they're not quite as tall as me, but they're pretty good. See, I feel like I had just figured out how much water things needed, and then the beetles arrived eating up the leaves, which is so frustrating. But look at this, 2 sunflower buds. I'm hoping these guys will make an appearance sooner rather than later. These 2 had been planted earlier, and then I planted them in the ground here. Oh, shoot. Look at that. They've started eating this too. This, I would say, these Super Bells peonies have been the most successful thing so far. They put out a ton of new leaves, but I'm gonna have to, see, I did spray things with the spray, and I got a pesticide spray, but that does not seem to discourage the beetles. In my June reading vlog, I planted a bunch of seedlings, and I planted some right in the ground and some I did in pots. The ones in the pots came up first, but I have to say the ones that I planted directly in the ground seemed sturdier. I think I might have watered the ones in the pots too much. However, I have transplanted everybody outside now. These sunflowers are certainly doing well, as long as the stupid beetles will stay away from them. No eating my sunflower leaves. Look at that poor one. I decided to get 2 tomato plants from a gardening center. Just look, I've got a whole little row of lovely tomatoes. In fact, should we pick this guy? It looks like he is ready. Yeah, he came right off. I will wash it and eat it, and it will be delicious. In fact, this one feels like he's not quite ready. I'll leave him a little longer. This guy is also almost ready. These ones are supposed to be yellow pear bells. Oh, I can't remember what they're called. I'll have to consult my plant journal. And yes, my poor fire witch dianthus. Stupid bugs got at it and ate out the buds, which was so frustrating. But like, there is one flower over there, so we'll have to see if maybe it comes back. Oh, look, that's a new bud. So maybe it's just, adjusting. I think that when you plant things in the ground, it takes a while for them to put out roots and adjust. My impatiens are putting out some new buds, so I'm hoping they will have some new pink flowers. Somebody posted in the comments after I included my hydrangea in my June reading vlog, but this is in fact a lace cap hydrangea, so it's supposed to look like that. The flowers only grow around the edge, and then you just have the little purple in the middle. It is pretty, although when I bought it, I thought I was buying a, regular hydrangea. Ah, there's one of those stupid beetles. Apparently it's an invasive species, the Japanese beetle. Trying to grow things really does give you so much more respect for, generations past who were farmers and who worked the land to grow enough for themselves and their families. Because it's like, as soon as you figured out how much water and sun a plant wants, then the bugs come and get it. I'm not even sure what bugs were eating these guys. Also, during a thunderstorm, they got kind of bent over, so I'm not sure. These guys seem to be perking back up, but I don't know how. Maybe does he need should I get him a stake maybe to help him? Come on, guys. I think these are gladiolus bulbs that I planted in March or April. Hopefully some flowers will emerge from these at some point. These are the only seedlings that I left in a pot, and I planted 2 beans in with these seeds, which I can't even remember which seedlings these were at the moment. And look, my mom actually grew this, but she has others as well. It is, I think, a variety of morning glory, which is kind of crazy, because look at how ferny and leafy it is, and it looks so cute trained around this little circle. These are my celosia. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I had planted these outside And I thought they liked sun, but the sun kind of bleached them. And I feel like their colors are just now coming back. These ones still have their original beautiful, beautiful, vibrant colors, which are just so lovely and so much fun for summer. Why, hello there, friends. I just had a very successful day at the outlets. I found a dress and I got something at Le Creuset. I'm feeling very Swiss today. I wore this outfit when we visited Switzerland 2 years ago. So there have been many times when I have stopped in a Le Creuset to browse. I don't own any Le Creuset pots or pans. This is my very first one. Look at that, made in France. So you'll notice this area of my farmhouse is green. The countertops in my kitchen are green. And this little pot just spoke to me. It said, I need to come and live in your farmhouse. Look at the color. I think it was called rosemary. It was 35% off. Yes, please. There it is. Isn't that so darling? I don't have a saucepan this size, so it's really functional as well as absolutely beautiful. And I'm going to wash it right now and use it right away. Actually just put my hammock back up today. We've had quite a lot of wind and rain lately, and I didn't want it to get blown away, so I brought it in. There was one night in particular where the wind was just like absolutely insane, but it's nice to have a little bit of a sunny sky today. I've been reading a couple of different things. I have picked up Rainbow Valley. This is the second to last Anne of Green Gables book. So Anne is all grown up, and we're really hearing about all of her children, and Rainbow Valley is one of their favorite spots to play. It's really amazing, the world and the number of books that Ella Montgomery wrote about Anne. Like, there are so many that I can't even remember all of the plot lines, and I've read all of them up to Rainbow Valley. Rilla of Ingleside is the last, and I haven't read that one yet. But she often mentions characters from the past books, like secondary characters, and tells you maybe how they turned out. But there are also so many people just from the village, from Four Winds, from the harbor and over harbor, that maybe made appearances in past books, but like they weren't one of the romances or kind of one of the main plot lines. And it's hard to tell them all apart. It makes you feel like Ella Montgomery must have been very closely connected to the world she created. She must have thought a lot of her characters, and she must have lived in that community in her mind, because obviously she remembers all of the past, all of the past people from her past books. Yes, the main characters obviously are not hard to remember. Anne herself and Susan, her right-hand man, of course Dr. Blythe, and all of their children. I think that Jem, the oldest, is 13 maybe in this book, but he's still one of the crew. I loved this description of Rainbow Valley. They're getting ready to have a snack. I think they're roasting or frying up some fish. The brook gave Adam's ale of unsurpassed crystal. What a way to refer to water. Only Ella Montgomery would refer to water as Adam's ale of unsurpassed crystal. For the rest, there was a certain sauce, compounded of fresh air and appetite and youth, which gave to everything a divine flavor. To sit in Rainbow Valley, steeped in a twilight half gold, half amethyst, rife with the odors of balsam fir and woodsy growing things in their springtime prime, with the pale stars of wild strawberry blossoms all around you, and with the sough of the wind. Do they mean sigh? S-O-U-G-H. I'm gonna have to look up and see if that's a different sound other than a sigh. And tinkle of bells in the shaking treetops, and eat fried trout and dry bread was something which the mighty of earth might have envied them. I think Nan is my favorite of the crew. I think they say that one of her teachers describes her as a blithe, which is inevitable. They had to make that joke at some point. Oh yeah, blithe by name and blithe by nature. I like it. It's not only the human characters who are present in this book, but the way Ellen Montgomery describes nature and just the scenery and surroundings is always so beautiful. And especially like when she kind of looks at particular moments. The little path was shadowy and narrow, trees crowded over it, and trees are never quite as friendly to human beings after nightfall as they are in daylight. They wrap themselves away from us. They whisper and plot furtively. If they reach out a hand to us, it has a hostile, tentative touch. People walking amid trees after night always draw closer, instinctively and involuntarily, making an alliance, physical and mental, against certain alien powers around them. I also liked this quote. It is never quite safe to think we have done with life. When we imagine we have finished our story, fate has a trick of turning the page and showing us yet another chapter. Anne's children are not the only ones who enjoy Rainbow Valley. There's another family who belong to the race of Joseph, the Mance family. So this is the Presbyterian minister's children. His wife unfortunately passed away, and he is so sort of dreamy, absent-minded, and always like reading a book or thinking kind of abstract philosophical, theological thoughts, that he doesn't really pay much attention to his kids, but they're so sweet. People are sort of scandalized, but also understanding. The Mance children end up kind of adopting a runaway who they find in a barn. That's when Mary Vance enters the story, and she's pretty great. The absent-minded minister doesn't even really notice that he has an extra child living under his roof. But eventually he talks to her, and then she really loves him and sees that he has a heart of gold. But she doesn't know much about God or faith, and I like the way she describes God. Mind you, I haven't got anything against God, Una. I'm willing to give him a chance, but honest, I think he's an awful lot like your father. Just absent-minded and never taking any notice of a body most of the time, but sometimes waking up all of a sudden and being awful good and kind and sensible. Oh, Mary, no, exclaimed horrified Una. I jinxed it by talking about the rain, didn't I? Because now the sun has gone away and there are gray clouds overhead. I did finish the Bhagavad-gita. I actually read it just over the course of a weekend. It's pretty slim, and it's very poetic and lyrical and beautiful, so it's lovely to just kind of sit down and read it all in one go. This is the same copy that I had in college courses, and it's really funny because I can see all these questions and like things that I didn't really get, and notes from class, and in some cases I've tried to like write in a little answer for my past self. I do remember liking it the first time, but obviously I had some reservations. So the Bhagavad-gita is set on an ancient battlefield where the armies of rival cousins stand ready to do battle. The Gita recounts the epic tale of warrior prince Arjuna as he confronts a life or death moral dilemma. What is the purpose or justice of war? Where does the right path of action lie when one duty conflicts with another? Gradually, through the intercession of his charioteer, the god Krishna, Arjuna is led to a higher understanding of the spiritual nature of man and the world. So what puzzled me the first read through the Bhagavad-gita is that Krishna, the god, is telling Arjuna that it's his sacred duty to go to war. But the arguments Arjuna has against it at first are pretty good. I see men gathered here, eager to fight, bent on serving the folly of Dhritarashtra's son. I do not want to kill them, even if I am killed, Krishna, not for kingship of all three worlds, much less for the earth. The greed that distorts their reason blinds them to the sin they commit in ruining the family, blinds them to the crime of betraying friends. I lament the great sin we commit when our greed for kingship and pleasures drives us to kill our kinsmen. So I do think it definitely takes kind of the whole of the rest. How many teachings are there? 17? 16? To get at what exactly Krishna means and why he's telling Arjuna, no, it's your sacred duty to fight. And I like that Arjuna, especially in the beginning, kind of pushes back. I like the questions he asks. I ask you to tell me decisively, which is better? I am your pupil. Teach me what I seek. You confuse my understanding with a maze of words. Speak one certain truth so I may achieve what is good. Krishna does not exactly speak one certain truth, but I think that's part of the point. Having faith in God, having faith in the Creator, who Krishna reveals himself to be, is really a key part of fulfilling your sacred duty. And the way I was kind of conceptualizing this, which I don't know if it's a perfect correlation or not, but in the Bible, when God tells Abraham to kill Isaac, with that, you don't hear Abraham struggling with it at all. Should I kill my son? Should I not kill my son? We just see him preparing to do it. And then, of course, we see the happy ending. God spares Isaac's life because of Abraham's faith. But that faith is kind of the point. Abraham just follows God's directive, even though he's asking something impossible, even though he's asking something that seems so obviously wrong, to kill your own child. And so I think that's kind of the point of the Bhagavad-gita too. Have that faith kind of in the divine's plan for your life and to cooperate in that plan as best you can as a mortal being, even when that plan seems incomprehensible to you. Because of course, God is thinking on a much, much bigger scale. I mean, by very definition, the creator of the universe knows a lot more about what's going on than we do in our kind of limited mortal state. Arjuna, you must learn to endure fleeting things. They come and go. Krishna is looking beyond just this one life and looking kind of on the entirety of time and trying to communicate this sort of uncommunicable truth. Rarely someone sees it, rarely another speaks it, rarely anyone hears it. Even hearing it, no one really knows it. I do think that like recognizing that limitation of your kind of mortal understanding is a really critical part of faith. You have to realize that rationally you're never going to be able to get there because you're being called to something that is essentially beyond your capacities. There's that quote from the Bible, "Now we see in a mirror darkly, but later we'll see face to face." I feel like it's kind of that idea. There were a lot of different passages that reminded me of the Bible. In fact, there was one paragraph. "When devoted men sacrifice to other deities with faith, they sacrifice to me, Arjuna, however aberrant the rites." That's the way I feel when I read other great spiritual works from other faith traditions. I'm a Roman Catholic, and my faith is really at the core of who I am. But there's just so much richness when you read, and learn about other faith traditions. Action imprisons the world unless it is done as sacrifice. Freed from attachment, Arjuna, perform action as sacrifice. It is a sacrifice to kind of put aside your own attachments, that's a big theme, put aside your own desires and follow what seems to be your sacred duty. When he gives up desires in his mind, is content with the self within himself, then he is said to be a man whose insight is sure, Arjuna. Understanding is defined in terms of philosophy. Now hear it in spiritual discipline. Armed with this understanding, Arjuna, you will escape the bondage of action. I think the bondage of action is kind of like, what Arjuna is doing really. Like saying, is this right? Is this wrong? I can't figure it out. Instead of just quieting those doubts and like moving forward in life and having confidence in kind of the situations that life presents to you as the will of God for your life. Men who master the worldly world have equanimity. They exist in the infinite spirit in its flawless equilibrium. He should not rejoice in what he loves, nor recoil from what disgusts him. Secure in understanding, undiluted, knowing the infinite spirit, he abides in it. Detached from external contacts, he discovers joy in himself. Joined by discipline to the infinite spirit, the self attains inexhaustible joy. Delights from external objects are wombs of suffering, and their beginning is their end, and no wise man delights in them. I guess I can't really say that I fully understand and get the Bhagavad-gita, but I do feel like I kind of got it more on this reading. And it was fun to have my notes from the past reading to remember what I was kind of thinking and what questions I was grappling with. Know that discipline, Arjuna, is what men call renunciation. No man is disciplined without renouncing willful intent. Wherever his faltering mind unsteadily wanders, he should restrain it and bring it under self-control. Krishna, the mind is faltering, violent, strong, and stubborn. I find it as difficult to hold as the wind. That's another one of Arjuna's good questions and good points. Without doubt, the mind is unsteady and hard to hold, but practice and dispassion can restrain it, Arjuna. In my view, discipline eludes the unrestrained self, but if he strives to master himself, a man has the means to reach it. Sorry, I'm reading these passages a little bit at random, just like going through and looking at the ones that I marked. But yeah, I just found the Bhagavad-gita a really beautiful reminder to stop worrying so much, because I feel like I worry a lot and I'm anxious about this. How's it going to turn out? Is it going to turn out? And the point of the Bhagavad-gita is just to, calm yourself and have faith and keep fighting for calm when it doesn't come naturally. I just like that idea that if you are continuously trying to get to God and continuously trying to hold on to your faith, then God will meet you halfway. He'll be your charioteer on the battlefield. I liked all the similes and metaphors in the 10th teaching. I thought this was a really neat sequence. Krishna is describing himself, and I thought this was really beautiful. I am the self abiding in the heart of all creatures. I am their beginning, their middle, and their end. I am Vishnu, striding among the sun gods, the radiant sun among lights. I am lightning among wind gods, the moon among the stars. I am the song and sacred lore. I am Indra, king of the gods. I am the mind of the senses, the consciousness of creatures. I am Himalaya, the measure of what endures. I am the purifying wind, the warrior Rama bearing arms, the sea monster crocodile, the flowing river Ganges. I am indestructible time, the creator facing everywhere at once. I am death, the destroyer of all, the source of what will be. I am the great ritual chant, the meter of sacred song, the most sacred month in the year, the spring blooming with flowers. I am the dice game of gamblers, the brilliance of fiery heroes. I am victory and resolve, the lucidity of lucid men. I am Krishna among my mighty kinsmen. I am Arjuna among the Pandava princes. I am the epic poet Vyasa among sages, the inspired singer among bards. I am the scepter of rulers, the morality of ambitious men. I am the silence of mysteries, what men of knowledge know. Yes, I'm very glad that I revisited this. I was partly inspired by reading Walden by Thoreau, because he quotes the Bhagavad-gita, and there actually was a little article at the end here called "Why Did Henry David Thoreau Take the Bhagavad-gita to Walden Pond?" And actually, who did write this afterward? Is it the editor? Barbara Stoller Miller. But she mentions not only Thoreau, but apparently Thomas Merton, which I have Thomas Merton on my shelf. He was a Trappist monk. He wrote a treatise about the Bhagavad-gita, which I now want to go read. But there's a quote from Merton in the afterword. Arjuna has an instinctive repugnance for war, and that is the chief reason why war is chosen as the example of the most repellent kind of duty. The Gita is saying that even in what appears to be the most unspiritual, one can act with pure intentions and thus be guided by Krishna consciousness. This consciousness itself will impose the most strict limitations on one's own use of violence, because that use will not be directed by one's own selfish interests, still less by cruelty, sadism, and bloodlust. There are so many. Is this how it goes? How do people do this? What do people do in a poll video?
Alright guys, we have... Welcome, what's up YouTube? We have here our Chilling Reign. A lot of great cards in this expansion we're hoping to get today. We're going to start off with Galarian Moltres pack. Why is the box in the shot?
I can't... Okay,
I know. I'm trying to get this straightened out. Alright, here we have the Galarian Moltres. As you can see, alright.
It's like ASMR and...
well, that's how it's calming and exciting at the same time.
I love it.
Open it from the top. Right.
Oh boy. Oh, you're not looking at it yet.
No, we're not going to. So the code card, we're not going to look at the side because, as you know, if there's if on the other side there's either green or white, I'll show you at the end. And if it's white, that means there's something good. If there's green, that means there's something bad. So we're going to move the less common cards to the front, so the rare is at the back. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And, alright, so now we're the energy card. Steenie. Karen's Conviction, Weeding Gloves, it's a little boring.
I could use those, I'm a gardener.
Diglett, Score Bunny, Shuppet, Cubfu, Lancer Fetched, and that is a reverse rare. Next is the rare. It's Celebi V! Rainbow! Actually, not Rainbow. No. Celebi V.
clouds today are so, so beautiful, even though it's a little overcast. The temperature is perfect. It's just such a beautiful afternoon. The scenery is a little different from my hammock read of today, which is Dante's Divine Comedy. So my brother Athos told me that he was reading Dante translated by Longfellow. I didn't know Longfellow translated Dante, and I had been meaning to pick up Dorothy Sayers' translation because I love Dorothy Sayers. The Lord Peter Wimsey books are so good, and I read her Letters to a Diminished Church. Those were like essays and talks she gave, and they're just so insightful. In one of them, she talks about Dante, and the way she wrote about him, it sounded like the way I would talk about Jane Austen. That, like, she just had such a close kind of relationship with him as a writer and an author, and she just loved him so much. And how fun. She then, after writing the Amazing Lord Peter books, she just sat down and translated Dante just like Longfellow. I guess after you've written your own great works, that's all that's left to do is translate Dante. Generally speaking, I skip introductions because, I don't know, I think it's nice to just read the book for yourself and not like rely on whatever the editor says you should think about it, but look at it with your own eyes and read it with your own understanding and decide what it says for yourself. And then if something doesn't make sense, then you can go look up an explanation. But of course, this introduction is my dear friend Dorothy Sayers, so I am going to go back and read it. I actually was sporadically reading a couple pages here and there was just some really interesting historical background about Dante's life. But before I started, I did read this Greater Images sort of summary she wrote, and I loved this point, which she makes again and again throughout the book, but here it's summed up kind of nicely. So she's talking about kind of the difference between the literal story, like the action that's taking place, and the allegory. So like what all of the action and what all of the people in hell symbolize. Hell in the story is the place or condition of lost souls after death. The sinners who there remain fixed forever in the evil which they have obstinately chosen are also images of the perverted choice itself. For the story, they are historical or legendary personages external to Dante and to us. For the allegory, they figure his and our disordered desires, seen and known to us as we plunge ever deeper into the hidden places of the self. Every condemned sinner in the poem is thus the image of a self-condemned man, actual or potential. In every man, neither in the story nor in the allegory is hell a place of punishment to which anybody is arbitrarily sent. It is the condition to which the soul reduces itself by a stubborn determination to evil, and in which it suffers the torment of its own perversions. I am planning to read Purgatorio and Prejudice as well. This is actually my second time through it. I read these back in college. It was a different translation though. This is my first time with Dorothy. But I just think this was such a helpful framework to kind of think of this in terms of, it's not just about like, oh, Dante didn't like these people and so he sent them to hell, because a lot of the personages you read about are famous people from classical literature, but also Florentines. So Dante was from Florence, and so a lot of the people he knew, and he puts in here both friends and enemies into the different circles of hell. But on a deeper level, they don't so much just literally represent his enemies, they represent the enemies within our own selves. So often sins can kind of disguise themselves, but here in hell, sins that we are all tempted to and sometimes fall into are just stripped bare, and you see them exactly as they are. So when we begin, we find the Dante in the story lost. Midway this way of life we're bound upon, I woke to find myself in a dark wood where the right robe was wholly lost and gone. Ay me, how hard to speak of it, that rude and rough and stubborn forest, the mere breath of memory stirs the old fear in the blood. He's obviously stumbled from the straight and narrow way. I looked up and saw the morning rays mantle the shoulders of the hill, from that planet bright which guides men's feet aright on all their ways. And this a little quieted the affright that lurking in my bosom's lake had lain through the long horror of that piteous night. So there are still some rays of light, on the horizon, but obviously he's in a dark and shadowy place, and that is where Virgil finds him. Virgil is, of course, Dante's guide, taking him through hell and through purgatory. Virgil wrote the Aeneid, which I feel like maybe I should reread after I finish the Divine Comedy. Dante is a little alarmed, though, and worried when he's first invited on this journey. Day was departing and the dusk drew on, loosing from labor every living thing save me and all the world. I alone must gird me to the wars. As one who wills and then unwills his will, changing his mind with every changing whim, till all his best intentions come to nil. So I stood havering in that moorland dim, while through fond rifts of fancy oozed away the first quick zest that filled me to the brim. So he tries to get out of it, and Virgil's just like, come on, man. Yeah, this edition has all these like maps throughout. I feel like Dante can be a little bit intimidating. I mean, naturally so. And I did love it and got a lot out of it the first time. Rereading it with Dorothy Sayers is just such a pleasure because she loves and understands it and is so familiar with all of the like other scholarship on it, other translations, all of the references that Dante is making. So she not only like fills you in on things that you don't understand, she also suggests how she would read the allegory. But it's not at all like, this is the only way to read it. It's just, it feels like a conversation with a friend. Like, here's how I think of it. Yeah, so at the beginning of each canto, she does a quick summary of the storyline in that canto. The cantos are actually fairly short. And then she has the images, so she talks about kind of the meaning behind, and then you come to the notes, which like describe, you know, references to people and classical allusions. There are lots and lots of classical allusions. Dante and Virgil's journey has been willed by God, so they are able to enter everywhere, even when the fiends of hell try to stop them. See, no one in hell is sorry for what they've done. Like, not at all. They complain, but they tell you perfectly honestly what their sins were. But like, they're definitely not interested in repentance. And as Dorothy Sayers pointed out, they've kind of imprisoned themselves in their punishment. They've chosen this. One of the things she pointed out was how in the first couple of cantos, so as you get deeper and deeper into hell, the sins get worse and worse. So the first sins often kind of disguise themselves as, you know, love for another person or love for things of the earth, like the gluttonous. And Dorothy Sayers pointed out how the description of Dante's journey between these first few circles is very vague. Like, in some cases, he faints and Virgil carries him to the next canto. Whereas later in the Inferno, it's very well mapped out. You can see exactly how he gets from circle to circle. And she points out that that's kind of how you first fall into sin. Like, you don't really see where you're going. You don't notice it. But then the deeper and worse sins, it's like you're fully conscious of those. In the third circle, it's always raining. One ceaseless, heavy, cold, accursed quench. What a great description. Athos and I are planning on doing a discussion video where we kind of compare our impressions of Inferno. And actually, my brother Porthos is also thinking of reading a different translation, so it should be really fun. So if you're interested in the Divine Comedy, definitely look out for that. I feel like I shouldn't say too much because we'll be discussing it more in depth. I've tried to mark different passages I like, and this was one of them. What is this luck, whose talons take in hand all life's good things that go so pleasantly? Then he, Virgil, ah, witless world, behold the grand folly of ignorance. Make thine ear attendant now on my judgment of her, and understand. He whose high wisdom's over all transcendent, stretched forth from the heavens and guiding spirits supplied, so that each part to each part shines resplendent, spreading the light equal on every side. Likewise for earthly splendors he saw fit to ordain a general minister and guide, by whom vain wealth, as time grew ripe for it, from race to race, from blood to blood should pass, far beyond hindrance of all human wit. Wherefore some nations minish, some amass great power, obedient to her subtle codes, which are hidden like the snake beneath the grass. For her your science finds no measuring rods. She in her realm provides, maintains, makes laws, and judges, as do in theirs the other gods. Her permutations never know truce nor pause, necessity lends her speed. So swift in fame men come and go, and cause succeeds to cause. Lo, this is she that hath so cursed a name, even from those that should give praise to her, luck whom men senselessly revile and blame. But she is blissful and does not hear. She with the other primal creatures gay, tastes her own blessedness and turns her sphere. I feel like this is one example of Dante kind of merging classical and Christian images, the way luck is sort of a goddess of her own kind, a guiding spirit supplied by God. This actually reminded me of in Tolkien, the Silmarillion, the way he describes the Arda. I feel like luck sounds like one of the Arda. Okay, just one last quote. This is actually one of Dorothy Sayers' notes, and I thought it was so interesting. She talks about why usury is a crime against God's bounty. Dante's thought in this passage, which is that of the medieval church, is of such urgent relevance today that it is worthwhile to disentangle it from his, to us, rather odd and unfamiliar phraseology. What he is saying is that there are only two sources of real wealth, nature and art, or as we should put it, natural resources and the labor of man. The buying and selling of money as though it were a commodity creates only a spurious wealth and results in injury to the earth, nature, and the exploitation of labor, art. The attitude to men and things which this implies is a kind of blasphemy, since art derives from nature as nature derives from God, so that contempt of them is contempt of him. This, I feel like, she talks about a lot more in her, in Letters to a Diminished Church. There's an essay where she talks about, work as art, all kinds of work as art. So I just thought it was fun to see that pop up here as well. Yes, I'm really enjoying my journey through hell with Dorothy and Dante and Virgil. Actually, though, I'm really excited for Purgatory and definitely for Paradise. I think there will be even more great insights into the soul in those two. If you've been thinking of picking up the Divine Comedy, I would highly recommend Dorothy Sayers' translation, which, as you can see, Penguin Classics has a very nice edition of. I feel like my dress and my book match my celosia or my mango lantana. I have been rereading Pride and Prejudice. It's been so much fun. I just got to the part where we arrive at Pemberley, and I always feel like when I'm rereading this, when I hit that part, it's like I don't want to put it down. It's just so delicious, so wonderful. I mentioned this in my Mansfield Park character map video, which if you haven't caught that, I'll link it up above. It was my last one. I've now mapped out all of Jane Austen's 6 novels plus Lady Susan, so that was really fun. But I was talking about Fanny, the heroine of Mansfield Park, who I absolutely love, and saying that what sets her apart is really what sets all of Austen's heroes and heroines apart, and that is that they don't let other people think for them. They think for themselves, they have really tested and thought about their own convictions, and they stand by them. And you know what? Sometimes they find that their beliefs were wrong, and when they realize that, they don't sort of hide from that knowledge. They step up and face it, and I feel like the letter, and especially Lizzie's response to the letter, is such a great portrait of exactly that happening. Because Lizzie first reads Darcy's letter sort of in this sort of blind rage. She's so angry that he's the one who split up Bingley and Jane, and he is obviously not flattering about her family. But then as she reads the truth about Mr. Wickham, she's so shocked that she realizes, wait a minute, was I wrong? So she thinks it through. She compares it to all of her interactions with Mr. Darcy and Mr. Wickham. She tests his story, as it were, and realizes that this must be true. And then she goes back and rereads the first part of the letter, and she realizes that there's more justice to that than she would have liked to admit. In this time period, obviously, your family was important to the person you were going to marry, not just because of their status, though. In Pride and Prejudice, we see how family can be important just sort of on a character level. Like, if you respect somebody's family, maybe you're more likely to marry into it. Like, I was thinking how Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet are not very well matched. We see Lizzie reflecting on that, and how, Mr. Bennet kind of became really jaded. He married Mrs. Bennet when she was young and beautiful, and he didn't realize how empty-headed she was, and, he is not very happy in his marriage. But we meet Mrs. Bennet's brother, Mr. Gardiner, also her sister, Mrs. Phillips. It's so funny to think that those three are siblings. And Mr. Gardiner is extremely sensible. He's one of the best characters. In fact, when he is at Pemberley with Lizzie and they meet Mr. Darcy, Lizzie is so proud of she's overhearing their conversation between Mr. Gardiner and Mr. Darcy, and she's so proud of her uncle that he's a great guy. He's really smart. He has interesting things to say. And so I wonder if when Mr. Bennet was courting Mrs. Bennet, maybe he met Mr. Gardiner, Mrs. Bennet's brother, at that time too, and he was impressed by how sensible Mr. Gardiner was, and maybe that made him think that, oh, well, Mrs. Bennet can't be too empty-headed because here's her brother. Of course, that's kind of the opposite situation to what happens with Darcy. He's so disgusted by Mrs. Bennet and the younger sisters, by their lack of propriety, that it's that more than her lack of connection or her lack of fortune, it's the lack of character within her family that he is not impressed by. But he comes to realize that that is wrong. He has realized that you are not defined by your family. Miss Darcy is such a great character. I wish that we could hear what Darcy told Georgiana about Elizabeth. Like, how much did he tell her? How soon did he mention Elizabeth? Like, there was one series of, it was actually 3 novels of, like, you know, Pride and Prejudice knockoffs. They were told from the perspective of Mr. Darcy. They weren't great. They were okay. But it was fun because we saw his letter to Georgiana, and he did mention Elizabeth, but I wonder, like, what exactly Jane had in mind. From Georgiana's perspective, we hear that her brother's recommendation was enough to ensure her favor. His judgment could not err. Is it err or err? I'm never sure. And he had spoken in such terms of Elizabeth as to leave Georgiana without the power of finding her otherwise than lovely and amiable. I always think it's so interesting the way Elizabeth sort of conjectures that Darcy wanted his sister, Miss Darcy, to marry Mr. Bingley. And it's obvious that Miss Bingley wants that, but like Darcy himself wanted that. And you know, when you think it through, it makes perfect sense. Poor Georgiana, you know, she went through the whole thing with Wickham. It's hard to find a good guy out there. And here, Darcy, like, comes across Bingley. I mean, if he's worthy of Jane Bennet, then he's obviously a solid guy. He's charming. You know, I don't really blame Darcy for just in the back of his mind. And Jane Austen herself confirms it, that, you know, Darcy wasn't, like, plotting for it, but at the same time was kind of hoping that Bingley and Georgiana could wind up together. You know, it feels like there have been Pride and Prejudice knockoffs about practically every conceivable character and scenario that is, like, unexplored in the book, or even ones that are explored in the book. They just rewrite them to their own preferences. But I don't think there is a knockoff that is about Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet's courtship. That would be an interesting scenario. I kind of wonder if I should try to write it myself. Although I feel like that's one of the hardest things to do, is to write a Jane Austen knockoff, because I know I don't even bother to read very many Jane Austen knockoffs because I'd rather just be reading Jane Austen. Like, it's just so impossible to compare. Her command of language is so good and her sentences are so beautiful that if you try to sort of mimic it, you just come off flat. And of course, if you're writing about Regency characters and her characters, if you're not writing somewhat in that style, then it also comes off flat. Yes, I would always say, you know, taste sparingly of the Jane Austen knockoffs and mostly come back to Jane. Anyway, it's been really fun to revisit this and reread this this month. Perfect timing for Jane Austen July. It's so fun to see everybody's posts and see so much Jane Austen on Instagram and YouTube. Have you been reading anything for Jane Austen July? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. Did a beginning of July plant update, so I thought I would do an end of July update as well. These are those pesticides I mentioned. The Maggie's Farm, it did get rid of some mold on my beans, but it did not help with the Japanese beetles. The blue one was great at keeping the beetles away. I do have some Disney pins out there. This guy seems to have moved into my porch area. Not pictured, the wasps who also tried to move into my porch area. I'm trying to train my bean sprouts to go around those poles. The ferny Morning Glory has been doing beautifully, and my impatiens came back, which makes me so happy. This is what this little bush looked like when I bought it at the garden center, and then unfortunately all of the pink flowers died away. I think it wasn't getting enough water, so it's lovely that they have all come back. Sadly, my Fire Witch Pink Dianthus has not made such a roaring recovery. It does seem to be a little bit happier. Remember how I was wondering at what point my gladiolus might put out some flowers? Well, the buds have appeared. If you don't like flowers, you might find this plant update a little boring. But it's been a really exciting part of the year to learn more about gardening. To see the seeds that I planted come up and flower, I planted those Candy Tuft from seed. The yellow tomatoes didn't seem particularly happy. They did ripen, but the little red tomatoes seem very happy. That plant has exploded in size. My sunflowers are getting so tall. I had those 2 early blooms, but there are lots more buds that look like they are getting ready to make an appearance in August. Well, friends, I thought we would finish up our July reading vlog. Thank you guys for coming along. I hope you enjoyed all of the reads, all of the hammock time. I think it was a pretty good reading month. I finished Rainbow Valley. It was charming. You could totally see the ending coming, but it was still charming. Finished the Bhagavad-gita. I'm almost through Inferno, so I'll probably be able to finish that before the end of July. Pride and Prejudice, I think I'll wrap up early August. I have been making good progress in Henry IV Part 2. It reminds me a little bit of like a Disney sequel. It's like not quite as good as the original. Not sure if we really needed it. Elizabeth was the queen when Shakespeare was writing, and of course her family, her ancestors were the Henrys, so I'm pretty sure that's why we have so many Henry plays. Henry IV Part 1 and 2, Henry V, and then there are 3 Henry VI. Like, come on, it's bad enough that there are 2 Henry IVs. Henry IV Part 2 reminds me a little bit of Cars 2, because the directors were like, you know, Mater, people love Mater. Mater needs a movie. And with Henry IV Part 2, it was like, you know, Sir John Falstaff, everyone loves Falstaff. Falstaff needs a play. We need more Falstaff. He's in The Merry Wives of Windsor too, I think. Personally, I didn't really need more Falstaff. But in spite of that, there is beautiful writing and like iconic lines. Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. That's Henry IV Part 2. Of course, we mentioned how Henry IV Part 1 was discretion is the better part of valor. It feels like even in these, you know, kind of more obscure plays, reading them, I can see why people read Hamlet or Macbeth or, you know, Midsummer Night's Dream. Like, these aren't quite up to that level, and yet, obviously, they're still absolutely woven into the fabric of not just literature but language, because here we're quoting them. I watched Undiscovered Country, the Star Trek movie, last month, which is like the perfect thing to watch if you are reading a lot of Shakespeare, because even the title it's a Hamlet quote. And General Zhang, the Klingon general, what's his name again? The Klingon general, he says that Shakespeare is better than the original Klingon. He quotes Shakespeare nonstop, so much so that at one point McCoy is like, can someone shut him up? Yeah, he quoted Richard II, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad tales of kings who lost their crowns, something like that. There has been plenty of sunshine this month, but there has also been plenty of rain, and I see a storm cloud over there, so I should probably wrap up. The only other thing I was going to mention is that I keep forgetting to mention it because it's not a physical book, it's an audiobook. I've really been enjoying the Thrawn duology. It's written by Timothy Zahn, and it is voiced by, oh dear, once again, I cannot remember the narrator's name. Isn't that a pity? I'll make sure I put it on the screen. Was that a mosquito? So it's The Hand of Thrawn, and wow, I was really not prepared to talk about this because now I can't remember the name of the second book that I've been listening to. The Hand of Thrawn, and it's on the tip of my tongue, but it's just not coming. I ought to remember it because I accidentally bought the ebook version of it first, and I was like, oh, this isn't too expensive, and then I realized actually I meant to buy the audiobook, which is kind of expensive, but luckily I was able to just return the ebook. And I think the audiobook is worth it because obviously they put a ton of production time into these narrations, like all the droids, all the space sounds, all the different accents and voices for all the different like races of creatures. The Quam-Jaa. See, how is it I can remember Quam-Jaa, but I can't remember the title of the book? The Quam-Jaa and the Quam-Quay. I won't spoil it, but their voices are quite something. I have really been enjoying those. Very fun for the car. So many different plot lines. I mean, in the Star Wars movies, there are multiple plot lines. You know, you jump from Luke to Han and Leia to Lando, but usually it's just 3 or 4, whereas in this novel it feels sometimes like there are 6 or 7 plot lines simultaneously that you're jumping back and forth, and sometimes it's like when you pick up one thread you're like, wait a minute, what was happening to this person? I always find it funny too, listening to audiobooks, how like things that I don't notice when I read, because maybe I read quickly and like I kind of skim over passages, like you notice them when you're listening. Like with Timothy Zahn, the story is great, The plot is great, so much action, the characterization is great, the imagination is great, but in terms of the writing, it does sometimes feel kind of repetitive, especially when like we've been behind the scenes with the Imperials and we know what they're planning. But then we go, you know, to Luke's point of view, and like he's like wondering, well, what does this mean? What could this be? And so he like posits 3 or 4 different ideas, and it's just kind of boring because like we already know what it is. However, that is a very small thing. Overall, I think they are great listening. Anyway, the rain has very kindly held off. We'll see if the mosquitoes also held off. I'm gonna go in and make some tea and finish editing this video. I hope you had a wonderful month. I'd love to hear about your July reads down in the comments. I hope you're having a lovely summer. I hope you're able to get outside, rain or no rain. Give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed. I'll talk to you guys again soon, and until then, I hope you have a magical and a bookish day. Bye.